Okay, my name is Doris Ban Fox Cohn. That's a lot of names. My mother called me Doris May. My father called me Dee Dee. Later in life, because when I got married to Al Fox, we ended up, there was a D in our family, D Fox, so Dee Dee was no longer available, so it became Doris. My brothers called me Dor. Don't ask me why, I have no idea. Then, and after many years, I was in my 40s, we joined Sunset Valley Country Club, played a lot of golf. Everybody there called me Dory. So whatever you want to say is just fine with me. I love Grandma, and I love whatever. I was named for my grandmother, Dora. I was born March 19th, 1932. My mother never told me, but I discovered this in doing research in genealogy. I knew her mother had been killed by a truck hit her on 24th and Dodge. She was going around a tree that was on the sidewalk. It's an article in the World Herald, which we have.
What was her name?
Her name was Dora Cattleman.
Okay.
She was killed on March 19th, 1920. And our mother never told me that date. And to this, I just can't believe that she never said anything, but that's the way it was. Okay, let's start with my dad, Sam Ban, drugstore on 18th and Jackson. He was born in Russia. His parents, my grandfather Joseph Mendel Ban, that's B-A-N. There's other relatives in Omaha, B-E-H-N, that's Rose Pittler, was a Ban, B-E-H-N. Her father was a nephew to my grandfather. My grandfather had one sister, Aunt Mima. Her last name was Kirke, K-I-R-K-E. Okay. Aunt Mima was a Kirke. Her husband had a shoe store. He was a cobbler on 13th and Douglas, and probably, I'm thinking it was the northeast corner, because my grandfather had Eagle Jewelry, which was basically a pawn shop, on the opposite corner, the southwest corner. So there we are. That is my grandfather's only family that I know of. There might have been more, but the name Ban, as you can see with the spelling, it probably was son of. And when he came through, he said whatever, and they just took Ban, and that was the end of it. So there's a lot of spellings. My grandmother, Rachel, she came from, let me look here, Kordakov in Russia. She had a very large family. Her name was Shuratz, S-H-O-E-R-T-Z or T-S, take your choice. She came over, my grandfather came over in 1912 by himself. My grandmother came over in 1914. They started with 5 children, they had 5. In Hamburg, Germany, there was a measles epidemic and she lost 2 children. One of whom was a twin. Now, there's my uncle, my dad, Sam, my uncle Jack Ban, my aunt Sophie, and there was a twin. We don't know it was either Jack or Sophie's twin, but nobody seemed to know. And my grandmother never said, so what do you know? They came over to Omaha. Let me go back just because I need to interject this. When my grandfather came over in 1912, he walked from their little town down to Odessa on the sea, and they took a freighter or whatever, came through Galveston. And the story is he walked from Galveston to Omaha. We're not quite sure about that story. However, he was on the boat with Sarah and Sam Cantor. Sarah and Sam Cantor, as it turns out, Aunt Sarah was a sister to my mother-in-law, Julia Fox. Never knew that until after I got married, and there was the story. So that's kind of fun, isn't it? Okay, my grandfather ended up in South Omaha, so when they came over, and he was a window washer. I have no idea how he managed that because, as my recollection and my brother's recollection, he never drove a car, ever. Never saw a car in the garage, nothing. So those are kind of good memories. Uh, it was just kind of fun to talk to my grandmother. She never talked about Europe. Her Yiddish was, back in the day, I could understand her really well because I could understand some Yiddish. It's all gone right now. They lived, my first recollection of a house was on 42nd, 3 houses south of Dodge. My Aunt Rose was born here, so that made the 4 children. I loved that house. You wanted memories of the house. You walked into the entryway and there was a piano right there on your left-hand side. Nobody in the house played the piano, not a soul. But they had to have a piano because that meant, I had no idea, probably it was a stature of some kind. It was important that you had a piano in the house. It was a 2-story house. It got wonderful smells. You talk about things that you remember. Remember the smell of the house. On Passover, she made gribenas, of course. Since I was the oldest grandchild, has privileges, I got the gribenas. I would share on occasion, but sometimes not. We would talk about memories. You talk about Passover. Passover memories are there. It would be, as we get, these are older memories. My brothers were born by that time. My Uncle Jack and Aunt Lil, Judy and Michael were there, my cousins. And my grandfather would sit, of course, at the head of the table. And he would lean on his pillow, with the water over here, because you had to wash your hands. And of course, the whole thing was in Hebrew, had absolutely no idea. And every once in a while, he would bang on the table, shah! Fine, and you shut up. Other memories of my grandfather and my grandmother, they belonged to the Little Synagogue, not the Kapuler. They belonged to the Little Synagogue on 25th and Seward. Aha, okay. I remember going there as a child before my brothers were born. I was little, it must have been 5 or 6. And we would pick up my grandparents and drive them there, but we had to stop at least a block away so he could walk in, because you had to do that. And Zeta, he died, he was in his early 60s, so he was not a well man, and it was hard for him to walk, I remember that. And he would walk in and I would walk with him, and because I was a little girl, I could sit on his lap downstairs. That was such a thrill. I absolutely felt like a queen, and the Kirschenbaums were all in back of us. The Bima was over in the middle, of course. And of course nobody was ever together, and then the rabbi would do this with the Shah business, and everybody would stop and then they would start again. Periodically I would go upstairs to sit with my grandmother, who had a CD in her hand, and I swear she could not read. I know she couldn't read. I know that she could not read. For some reason or another, the subject never came up. And of course, I don't know if you remember there was a curtain over. There was a curtain on occasion so that you could not see the men, which was really kind of interesting. If you thought about going to the Rosh Hashanah show, which is where my mother grew up on, 18th in Chicago, 17th in Chicago. The women sat upstairs, of course, and the men sat downstairs. And in my head, I'm digressing. In my head, I can remember looking down, because I used to go sit with Aunt Libby too, and looking down, and nobody had a yarmulke on. They all men wore hats, and you would see all these wide brimmed hats. It was just a memory. Okay, so that was really kind of fun. We getting back to my grandmother, my Baba. I loved her dearly. She's still a little lady. She could grow something on concrete. I don't care what it was. She would put it in the ground. She grew grapes and made wine. Yes, it's marvelous. And she could absolutely grow anything. And I don't care what it was. And I think my daughter Pam probably picked up on that. Pam is a master gardener. She's living in an apartment now, so she doesn't do it too much anymore, but she comes over and helps me out, so there we go. My grandmother and grandfather had a dog. I love that dog. He was a chow. She didn't call him Chow Chow. He was a chow. He's a big old dog. Never had a bath. Smelled terrible. Loved the family. Hated everybody else. That was I'll never forget that dog. His name was China Boy. So those are kind of good memories. My grandfather, talking about Eagle jewelry, and I have his calling card at home, which I will pass along at a different time. You talk about smells. I remember walking into the store. I used to go down there all the time, and I remember the smell. You walked in, and there were cases on either side, had a white tile floor, and at the very back was this huge brass gate with a safe behind it. And I'll never forget that. And I used to walk across the street to see my Uncle Kirky and that kind of thing too. It was just it was a wonderful upbringing. It really was. You remember wonderful memories of your grandparents, because I was fortunate enough to have them. My dad's, my mother's parents, of course, were gone. So these were my only grandparents. I truly, truly loved it. And again, I know he didn't drive, because remember on Sundays we'd go pick him up and take a ride. And we'd go get ice cream or whatever. And it was just a whole lot of fun. Okay, on my grandmother's, Baba's side of the family, the last name was Shuerts, and I think I said that Shoerts. Some of the family in later years went to sports. I don't know why. I can go back with my grandmother's parents and grandparents, so I can go back to the greats. And it's all on our genealogy, on our family tree, so it's there. Her father was Sholem Shuerts. Her mother was Shindle Bishkovsky, Bichovsky. Her parents were Chaim, and her mother was Rossi Tova. What her last name was, I have no idea. Okay, she was from Chudikov, and that's, who knows how it's pronounced, because I really don't. That's where she and her and Zeta were married. Her siblings were Gershon, Chaim, who I have a picture of, Rachel, Estrella, Luby, she became a Swartz, or he became a Swartz, and Bluma. Ends up that Bluma ended up here in Omaha. I never met her, but I did meet her daughter. And her name was Ruth, and she married a Waldorf. And they lived in Ohio, and then they moved to California. And I have reached out to the family. She had 2 sons. And I've reached out to the family, but have not been able to make contact. So there we are. Let's see. I'm thinking back, because I have such vivid memories of my grandmother after they moved from 42nd Street to a house off of Blondo on about 48th. And I remember that house quite well. It was a little house. It would, no stairs because it was very difficult. And I remember her making strudel. And I have her recipe, my mother has her recipe, and we all make the same strudel today. In fact, I did last week. Okay, let's go back to my dad. What did he do? Dad sold papers, as everybody did. He went to Central High School, and he went to Creighton and became a pharmacist. His first store was in South Omaha, small store. Then the store that I knew was on 18th and Jackson. And that was really kind of fun because it was a great neighborhood at the time, but it kind of deteriorated later on. And I could go down to the store, but he wouldn't let me walk around. He said the neighborhood wasn't too great. Well, there's a few houses of ill repute up the street and a few other miscellaneous things. So therefore, I was not allowed to go over there. I was allowed, however, when I think I was 15. Cohn Vacuum, which is Mobile Oil, their headquarters was across the street from Dad. And of course he knew everybody there. And I was 15, I needed a job. So guess where I went to work? Right there. My brothers, my two younger brothers, Arnie was born in 1939. Justin was born in 1942. So I was big sister. And I loved my brothers. They were mine to raise. Because mother was busy. She worked at the store, or she went to get Dad at midnight, and I don't care. I mean, I stayed home, of course, at midnight, of course. I don't care how old you are are responsible. So there we are. Our life was really, growing up, I remember the first house on 43rd in Davenport. It's still there. I've driven my kids by it. We moved from that house when I believe I was 7. But I remember playing with all my friends. We had an ice box, which everybody of an age remembers what an ice box is. You had a sign in your front window as to how much ice you wanted, because the guy came by, put it on his shoulder, put the block of ice underneath the ice box, and boy, you better remember to empty that tray, because otherwise it was a mess. Also, I remember on that street, the man that used to come by and sharpen your knives. And Mr. Kirschenbaum had, I don't think it was horse-drawn, it seems to me he had a truck. I don't know why, I think it was green. And he sold bread. And that's where you got your bread. So I remember the house on 43rd. When I was 7, we moved to 5612 Leavenworth. And that's where my brothers were born. And the house that I remember and where they grew up, the folks lived in that house for 47 years. It was a wonderful house. We all went to Washington School, went to Central High School. One of my geometry teacher was Miss Fawthrop. And she says, the only reason I'm passing you, Doris Ban, is because I taught your father. Is that a funny thing or not? So I was really lucky to get out of geometry. I did hate the course. And it's a wonderful, wonderful memories on 5612. We were half a block from Elmwood Park. I grew up in Elmwood Park. My brothers grew up in Elmwood Park. I go by it today and I can see where we went sled riding, but there's all kinds of trees and things that are there now. In those days, of course, you left the house in the morning and you came home when it got dark. Your mother never worried about you, ever. Your father never worried about you. You were fine. And you were fine because you were with your friends. And there was good friends. Friends that I remember we went to high school with. I love them dearly. Judy Bordy. The Bordys lived at the other end of our block. Bud Wolf lived there. The Ashfords, who had Crestwood Grocery on 60th and want to say 60th and Woolworth. It would have been right there. I don't know what's there now. Cold Drug went in over there, and Dad, when he left the drugstore, went to work for Kohl's in later life. That's where he stayed and retired from. Mother, of course, was a cateress at Bethel. She started there, I don't know how it started, but she did a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. And I think she got $25, and oh my God, that was marvelous. And then she did a wedding, and then Jeanette and Rosie Ferenstein, and Addie was in the kitchen. And Mother was doing bar mitzvahs and weddings, and she was doing them for $25 or maybe sometimes 50. And we told her, don't you think it'd be a good idea to charge by the bit? Oh, how can I do that? Well, she figured it out, and she did. And she stayed at Bethel for years and years and years, and taught Lucy just about everything she knew. And then she started catering at Temple, and that's where she ended up. And she finally retired, oh goodness me, early 90s, something like that. It would have been the early 90s, late 80s when Mother retired. Dad, in later years, had dementia, and it was very difficult. So she was pretty much taking care of Dad. They moved from 5612 to Regency in, I would say, the late 80s. That was tough. Those are memories that I really don't love too much, but I took her around to various and sundries apartments to look at. And my goodness, it was traumatic moving out of the house. It worked out because my mother made friends always, and she made many, many, many friends at Regency. Dad stayed there not quite a year, and then we moved into the home, and then Dad passed away. But Mother stayed at Regency for a good number of years, and then my brother Justin, who was living in Des Moines, he was a doctor in Des Moines, wanted Mom could not stay in the apartment. She would have to move to the home, and she really didn't want to. The home at that time didn't have single rooms. Most of them were doubles. This was difficult. Just wanted Mom to come to the home in Des Moines, which was beautiful. I don't know if you've seen it. The upstairs is like little studio apartments where you have your own dining room and everything. Everything was more. So Mom bit the bullet, and she moved to Des Moines with Justin, and just took really good care of her. He was there with her every Saturday. They had a thing going, and that's where Mother stayed, and Mother passed away in Des Moines in 1998. So that's kind of my family. I didn't get into too much with my brothers. My brothers, bless them, Arnie is married to Shelley Summer. They have 3 wonderful children. My brother Justin married Rita Noodleman, who was from Minneapolis, but they were living in California, and they have 4 marvelous, marvelous children. Justin passed away. He had a blood clot and just passed away in 2002. Okay, my life, what have I done? Well, I went to Central High. Me and a lot of other people went to Central High.
Who were some of your close friends?
That's where I'm going. My close friends were, well, let's see, there's Gloria Cohn Van, Ellie Bernstein Feldman. My best friend was Rita Swartz Cooper. Those were my very, very closest friends. I'm trying to think of the other names, but these were the people that I went with. I knew you were Jewish. You knew, seems to me I belonged to the sorority, and I can't remember. I tried to remember the name of the sorority, and I absolutely cannot remember it. Central was a marvelous thing. You went to Central, then the school was out, you went to the JCC, and after you left the JCC, you went down to, I think it was a Tuttle House, or was it a Harker's? One of the two, but it was a hamburger place, which was down the street from the JCC. And you sat there and you had French fries. And you smoked a lot of cigarettes. Yes, we did smoke. I was 13. I used to steal my father's cigarettes from the house. You know, what can I tell you? That's what you did. And then you got on the bus and you came home. Yeah, that was it. It was Central was marvelous. We loved Central High. Your friends were there. You went to Friday night parties, dances. Seems to me they were at the Shermont, and then from the Shermont, then we ended up at Peony Park. And when you dated at the age of 13. Don't ask, but everybody, I mean, that's what you did. You were in high school, you dated. It wasn't groups, it was a date. Your date picked you up. He'd come to the door and pick you up. And I had to be home at midnight, and if I wasn't home at midnight, I was in trouble, because then I got grounded for 2 weeks, and you didn't want that to happen. It was fun. It was really, high school was just a lot of fun. The teachers and, oh, goodness me, I could just go on and on and on about high school. It was a marvelous life. I met my first husband, Al Fox, there. Al was older than I was, but we went steady. I think I was, 15, probably 15, 16, and that was it. There was no other. Al went away to college, and I was still in high school. We made an agreement, yes, I could go out. I went out with other people, and he went out with other people. That worked out just fine. I name names, but I'm not going to go there. And then he, Colorado, but then stayed there just one semester and came back and went to school in Nebraska. And of course I went to all the parties down at the ZBT house. That was just a lot of fun. And I graduated high school, and it was decided that I should have a year away. I don't know how my parents afforded it. I have no idea. That and the wedding. I think they probably mortgaged the house. I am sure of it. But I went to Iowa. Judy Bordy was there. Brookstein, what was her first name? I'm trying to think. Her father was Jack. Okay, I can't think of her first name. Was there, I met a lot of marvelous Iowa people there. Sandy Andich was my roommate. Ruthie Mendelson was my roommate. And Velma Gannon. Velma married Kenny Sachs. Okay? And there were 4 of us that lived. We have like a suite of rooms. We have 2 bedrooms, whatever. And just as an aside, our roommate Sandy Andich was a musician and took up the bagpipes. It was kind of difficult studying when she was practicing, but that was fun. Al, I dated there. Al would come down on weekends, or I would go to Nebraska, but I stayed there 1 year, and that was it. Al and I got married in 1951. And it was, again, it was a big, beautiful wedding at the ballroom at the Blackstone Hotel. It had to be 300 people because my mother knew everybody. We will talk about my mother's family in a little bit. So Al and I got married in 1951. We stayed in Omaha a little bit and then decided that we were going to see the world. We moved to Phoenix and we moved to Los Angeles. I got pregnant, we came home. Home was Omaha. And built a house in Bagel. We were the first house. There were 2 built. Nobody was living there. We were the house, 6437 Glenwood Road. And there were 2 houses on the corner, and of course it built up. The Kirschenbaums lived next door, the Lewises were on the other side, the Plockets were across the street. It was Jewish. And you had your children. Jeff was born in 52, Pam was born in 54. Dee and Phil Fox moved down the street. Shirley and Herman lived at back of us. The Stearns were our backdoor neighbors, and at the time, Bess Stearns' father, Mr. Aiken, was living with them, and of course, Bess was the cookie lady. That's where my kids said, "Oh, that's the cookie lady." We moved from that house to 908 Hillcrest Drive, which was down and around the corner. Across the street were Tham and Willard Friedmans. The Newmans were across the street. The Newmans were down the street. Next door was Joe Hornstein. On the other side were the Rubens. It was, you were Jewish, and that's what you did. It's not like that today. Okay, let's just go back to my mother. My mother was a cattleman, Katleman, as opposed to the Casablanca cattlemans, which are Elman. The reason for the difference in the spelling was because the cattlemans had a scrapyard or whatever, and the man painted the sign. And the man painted the sign with EL and not LE, and that's the reason the difference in spelling. Okay? Family was family. The cattlemans were one very, very close family. My mother's, her mother's maiden name was Blumenthal. Okay, Blumenthal's in Omaha, and Cattleman's in Omaha. Those huge families. My mother's father, I did not know them. He was Aaron. His brothers and sisters were Aunt Ida, Aunt Hannah, Uncle Maury, Uncle Abe. There was another one that I did not know. And my mother's mother, Dora Blumenthal, her brothers were Uncle Harry, Uncle Abraham, not Abe, Abraham, Uncle Dave, and Uncle Louie. Now we have Aunt Hannah Dave, so we have Aunt Hannah Louie. To this day, I have to look up to see who's who with the family. Now, with all that, mother was the youngest. Let's see, there was Uncle Abe, Uncle Mo, Aunt Libby, Aunt Esther, and Mom. Mom was a tag-along. Her mother was 45 when she was born, so she was kind of a tag-along. And there were so many first cousins. And I used to wonder, I said, Mother, why have I got 5 Aunt Esthers? I have 5 Aunt Esthers. Well, in doing the genealogy, I discovered that there was an Esther that died. So now we have, and let me just tell you here, we have, let me look, we have Aunt Esther Zog, okay, Aunt Esther Zog Hockenberg. We have Aunt Esther Brown Swartz. We have Aunt Esther Blumenthal Rips. We have Aunt Esther Blumenthal Niebuhr. And we have my aunt, actual aunt, Aunt Esther Cattleman Pickus. 5. So they must have loved this Aunt Esther a lot, but I happened to find that one. Okay, mother, to this day, well, would have been, they were the closest family I've ever seen. You didn't do anything without a cousin being along. Somewhere, somehow, there was a cousin. When I had mother's 70th birthday, Bob and I were living at the apartment. I have pictures of all of the cousins, and of course they all played poker, and they all had a good time, and they just talked. So, it's fun memories. Really, really fun memories. Mom went to Tech High as opposed to Central because she was living with Aunt Libby and Uncle Dave at the time. 3009 Cass used to be a corner house, but now it's a third house. It's It used to be a third house, and now it's a corner house. When her mother was killed in an automobile accident in 1920, mother was, 12 or 13 at the time, and of course, you took care of your family. Aunt Libby and Uncle Dave were living at a different house, but I'm sure that my grandfather helped buy that house at 3009 Cass, and they all moved in together. There was Uncle Mo was still living at the house. There was Uncle Abe, my mother, my grandfather, and they all moved in together. And that's what you did. I remember that house vividly because mother was married from that house, and that's where Aunt Libby and Uncle Dave always lived. Across the street were the Chasins. Up the street, of course, were the Pinks, and then, of course, a whole bunch of Epsteins, because Aunt Libby was an Epstein, was an Epstein. And everybody, like Bagel, you lived in the same neighborhood. So I remember that. And Aunt Libby, God bless her, she could cook. She made things that I didn't love, called pacha. Anybody remember pacha? You took the feet of the chickens and you cooked it, they came out white and whatever. I did not care for that, but the rest of the family, some of them ate it. She made hemsel. And just old recipes that you don't make. I, to this day, still make kreplach, but I got that from my mother-in-law, Julia Fox. And we'll get to Julia at a different time. So Bob and I were married. I'm going back to that. And we lived in Bagel, and it was marvelous. Our kids had, to this day, the whole family lived there. Dee and Phil lived a half a block, and Shirley lived a half a block. So the cousins were close, and they're still close to this day. And of course, they're friends. They're still friends with Tom Friedman and the Newmans, and they still correspond. It was just absolutely wonderful. Al and I lived in that house till 1972. This is kind of a sad part, a hard part. We decided to move and moved into an apartment. Millard Margolin had built some apartments, Martinique. We moved into the Martinique. The day we moved is the day Al died. And my kids were, Jeff was 19 at Kansas, Pam was 17, was graduating high school at the time. It was very, very difficult, a very tough time. So I stayed there in the apartment, took care of my kids. Pam went to school. At the time, I was working. It was kind of a thing. I'm a Braille transcriber. I had started in 1955 at Bethel Synagogue. John Smith was our teacher. Braille groups were sprouting up because in 1955 was a measles epidemic, and you had a lot of blind children, and so it was something that happened. I don't know why I got started doing it. I just enjoyed it. And that was in 1955. So I was a Brailleist, and I brailled at the house. I was a volunteer. So as my children grew older, I think Pam must have been junior high. I was the kind of mother that you stayed home. In 1955, Pam was in junior high at that time, and I thought, okay, OPS needed a Braille transcriber. It's a long story, which I'll not even get into. So I went to work, and a good friend of mine became the teacher. She was from South Dakota. She had a blind child. Quote, you qualify, okay? Actually, she taught business education, but she became a marvelous teacher of the visually impaired, very, very, did wonderful things. So I was working. So when Al died, I thought, what the hell? I'm working, and I went back to school because I never graduated. And so that was wonderful. And I had some marvelous friends at that time. Ruth, Annie Kyman, Blanche Steinberg, Sylvia Jess. And they played bridge. Well, I wasn't very good, but they took me in and I played bridge, and they were friends. It was like their own personal group of people that were like you, and we could lean on each other. As it turns out, living at the Martinique, see, this would have been in 1975, thereabouts. I moved in 72, so it would be 75. I knew who Bob Cohn was. My dad played golf with Bob Cohn, and Cy Rife, and Jack Ban. And I knew who Bob Cohn was. And I thought, oh, well, that's nice. And he lived at the Martinique. My mother decided that I should come for dinner. Something going on? My mother decided I should come for dinner on Sunday night. I'm having Cy and Bob. I said, I can't do that. I've got a paper that's due, and I'm writing my paper, and then there's no computers. You wrote your paper on a typewriter with carbon copies, of course. I thought, you come. Okay, so I came and I met Bob Cohn again. I knew him forever. And he walked me out to the car, and he says, call me. What the hell? I'm gonna call you? But I told my good friend about this, Marianne, who I work with, and it was April. Finally in June, she says, haven't you called him yet? I said, I'm gonna call him. I did call him. And Bob and I got together, and we got married a year later. And that was 28 years we were married. Al and I were only married not quite 20. So I've had two really wonderful lives. My children, Pamela Leah Fox. She is, right now, she's 66. Jeffrey Allen Fox is 68. I was, growing up, they grew up in Bagel. Their friends today are still friends from Bagel, believe it or not. There were like Janet Ruth Gendler. She goes by Ruth Gendler now. She is a noted poet, and she and Pam still correspond today. It's really interesting. Okay, well, my kids, Pam was a Girl Scout. Yes, I was a Girl Scout leader. Jeff was a Cub Scout. Yes, I was a Cub Scout leader. They went to Western Hills with everybody else. The principal at Western Hills was Ruth Falk. This woman I never did love. She also taught 8th grade. My good friend Rita Cooper, she was her 8th grade teacher. I did not love this woman. She was pretty strict. On the one occasion, or maybe two, that Jeff had to eat lunch at school, they would have something like peas. He hated peas. He managed to throw up, of course. And they called me, and I come do whatever. It was really, she was really something. She really was. My kids, they loved where they lived. Pam, her older brother, he had a bike, of course, and she was 3 years old, and she wanted a bike. Well, okay, so we got her a bike with training wheels and all this stuff. The training wheels lasted like two days, and she's gone. And in those days, you didn't really worry about your children. They took off. Jeff and Tom Friedman used to get on their bikes, and they would be gone. And then they would come home 6-7 hours later. And why? Well, where'd you go? Well, I don't know. We went to Benson, we went here, we went there. You did not worry about your children. It was a marvelous, marvelous upbringing. Pam she just followed her brother around, and then pretty soon she would get mad. And I remember once, and she and I laugh about this, she really got mad about something. And she must have been 4 or 5 years old, and she packed her suitcase, and she went down to the corner, and she sat there. And Al and I watched this. We could see the corner we were the second house in, we could see the quarter. She sat there. Well, she wasn't allowed at the age of 3 to cross the street. So she stayed there. And finally it started to get dark. And I think Al went down and got her and brought her home. And then whatever it was gone, you know. I love to bake and cook, and you think about, you used to make chocolate cakes all the time. I remember I have pictures of the kids sitting on the cupboards eating the frosting. You know, I still have the pan that they ate out of. I refuse to get rid of that pan, I'm sorry. They went to Western Hill School, they went to Lewis and Clark, and they were both really, really good students, excellent students. And then from there, of course, they went to Central. Where else would you go? We did carpools in those days. We did carpools to Temple. We were Temple members, joined there. Jeff was 5 when we joined Temple. And so on Sunday morning, rain or shine, snow or whatever, I just put my coat on, put a pair of boots on, picked up whoever I had to pick up that day and drove them out, drove them to the synagogue. You never worried that your car would get stuck because somebody would pull you out. You never worried that you were dressed or that you had makeup on. You just did that. And all the other mothers, she'd wave, you know, okay, fine, and hello, and goodbye, you know. And then your kids went to Sunday school. We loved Rabbi Brooks. My children just absolutely adored this man. They really, really did. And they were bar mitzvahed and confirmed. They just, and it was, as I said before, it was such an easy upbringing. At Central, during those difficult times in the late 60s, early 70s, there were problems. There was a lot of drugs at that time that were coming in. And then that's when you started worrying about your children. Jeff went away to Kansas for the first 2 years and then transferred to Texas where he graduated. Jeff has a wanderlust. He's never married. He became very interested in meditation, transcendental meditation, all this kind of thing, and traveled the world. He just ended up in Switzerland and Europe and I can't even name all. In the United States, he was just busy all over the world. Pam went to Michigan, and it was difficult for Pam because her father had just died, and the adjustment was very, very, very difficult for her. Her cousin Jim was there at the time. Jim Weinstein was there, so that really helped. She did make friends. She met a lovely young man, and eventually they were married after she graduated and after but that ended in divorce. They were quite young then, were not ready. So Pamela, as I said, Jeff never married, but Pam married Ted. By this time she was living in New York. She and Mitchell had moved to New York. And Pamela could not have children. She had had some serious operations when she was in high school, and for some reason or other there was a problem there. But she and Ted adopted my grandchildren. Ariel was 1985. She was Columbia, South America, and Lily in 1987, Columbia, South America. So these are my 2 grandchildren, I tell you. And they're 35 and 33 now. I mean, they're marvelous. Pam stayed in New York for 40 years and she's taken the name Fox back and has moved to Omaha in, I think, late 2017, 2018, thereabouts. It was a good choice at that time. Jeff had a stroke in 2017 and has left him, it's an aphasia, so it's his memory. he was no longer able to, he was a programmer mutual, could not continue to do that. And Pam came back and I needed her here and thank God she did. It's marvelous because she's living at One Pacific and Jeff is living at One Pacific. So they kind of help each other out and they help Mom too. My granddaughters, who were raised in New York, children. Lily was married, I forgot how many years ago, maybe 10, close to 10. And she and her husband moved to Colorado, Boulder. They're since divorced. And Lil has this knack, even though she's adopted, she's Jeanette's kid. She's a pastry chef. And Lil has made a name for herself nationally. She's known throughout the United States and also Europe because she took some training in France, the southern part of France. She's working now at an Israeli restaurant in Boulder called Safta. And she's so creative, I just can't believe that she can do this. It just amazes me. And she loves what she does. She really does. She's taken some of my old recipes and Mother's old recipes and reworked them, of course. And I can't imagine how she does this. I really can't. My Ariel is going with a lovely young man. His name is Jesse, and they grew up, together in Long Beach, New York. They didn't know, they met each other but in high school, but then not until they graduated college and then met each other again. They have moved to Los Angeles and they're both working, and Jesse goes back to New York periodically. His father had passed away and he kind of helps with his mother and two sisters who are married. And so those are my grandchildren, and they're both coming in Mother's Day this year. First time we've been together in a couple of years. I cannot believe it. So I'm getting Ariel and Pam is getting Lily this time. We may trade off. We'll see what happens. But I'm very close to my granddaughters. Bob's family. When Bob and I got married, his son Rick was living. Rick passed away in 2001. He had MS. Rick married, had 4 children. His daughter Skippy, whose real name is Joanne, is like my daughter. I couldn't ask for anything more. God bless. Skippy is marvelous. Skippy and Monty, her husband, lived in New York, and Bob and I would go visit. They have since many years ago, moved to God's country, Jupiter, Florida, Palm Beach, really. And Skippy is my daughter. She and Pam, she's very close with Pam. You marvel at something like that. You really, really do. I haven't seen Skip for 2 years because of COVID. But she's going to be here this July. Skip and Monty never had children. They travel. I do worry about them a great deal. I worry about Monty. He's had 5 back surgeries, so right now he's recovering from another one. And but she will be here in July, so I'm really excited. I'm very fortunate to have had the life I have. 2 wonderful husbands, marvelous children. I'm not as close with Rick's children for some reason or other. Just Joey, who went to the 3rd kid. Joey is growing up because Rick had MS and was so sick. Joe lived in a foster home. The mother had left the family. Joe lived in a foster home, and Bob and I used to pick up Joey on weekends, and he'd come over and spend the weekend with us. All Jewish holidays he came with us. They weren't raised with any religion, but whatever he has is Jewish. And Joe and I have stayed close ever since. He is my kid. Joe and his wife have just recently moved to Colorado Springs, and I truly miss my Joe. because I don't travel too much anymore. So hopefully he'll get back here to see us. But we correspond, we talk, correspond, we text. Thank you. I mean, who corresponds these days? We text. And that's my family. I can't ask for too much more. 89. I have a new dog. Yes. I'm usually not without a dog. I was for 6 years. I have a new dog. So during COVID, she has kept me going. I love her dearly. Her name is Cassie, and she's a 10-pound Shih Tzu. And she's my best buddy. And of course, she loves everybody except other dogs. I mean, if she met you, you're her best friend for life. So there we are. That's my story. There's probably lots more. I can go into the foxes, and if you want to do that today, we can. Otherwise, I can just do it a different day.